This is the team associated TC8 Steel-Spec with the steel chassis. And this was built up to be a demo car at our indoor carpet track. And before that happens, I thought it'd be cool to check it out and talk about the build. I was told there were some issues, but the final product looks pretty nice. So we'll check out the car. We'll compare it to the Yokomo MS1.0, which we used for a series a while back, and then we'll throw it on the track. Now maybe we'll just talk about how we outfitted this car first, because it does have a Biddy Design Hyper HR body that we had custom painted by a local painter, and it turned out really dang nice. And then we even added some custom stickers on there to give a shout out to our Outback Raceway. Now underneath the hood, this is a ProTech low profile 381 servo, 40mm fan, Coyote stock motor, which are not available yet at AMain Hobbies, but they will be soon. The 80 amp Coyote ESC, and then the 6300 full stick pack, and it is the LCG. These are also Rush pre-mounted TC tires, one up front body stoppers. There's also the 10-gram weights added, and then all of the top screws are ProTech titanium grade 5 that were added. All those items were not included with the kit. Now we have the steel chassis version of this vehicle, which is really snazzy, but it's also available with the carbon fiber chassis, which will flex more. This steel chassis is meant for the highest grip surfaces, and you can see it's pretty dang thin. And when you give the car a twist, it actually does flex just a little bit. Now, some of the really cool features about this car, Team Associated says it's a mid-motor design. We have symmetrical belts front and rear. They're gonna be the same length. We have a split carbon fiber top deck where we've got this front piece and then the back piece. And depending on how many screws you use, will also affect the flex of the chassis, which is pretty standard. Most touring cars are like that. We also have what Team Associated is calling the long pivot ball suspension. You can see the pivot points in the back end and the front end are really close together. And then the suspension also uses these pillow balls on the bottom, which is pretty interesting. And then there's, of course, different spacers here, so you can make adjustments pretty easily. Another really cool thing is that we've got adjustable turnbuckles on all the corners. They're notched, of course, but then the turnbuckles actually are supported by the ball cup and the upper arm to keep it pretty stiff, and it is pretty slop free. Now this is the rear end, and we do have adjustable toes, so you can change your rear toe settings. In the front end, it's got adjustable KPI. We also have new shocks on this vehicle. They're ultra short, and then they're more centralized, Team Associated says, so they're not really positioned on the front or the rear. They're more kind of in the middle of the suspension area. They just kind of centralize that weight, and they are just ridiculously short. They do come with the Kashima coated bodies. They're threaded, but it is just really crazy how short they are. Now for the drive shafts, they are double jointed drive shafts used in the front and rear, and Team Associated is calling them the DVC drive shafts. We also have a 3D printed bumper, no foam bumper on here, and it's really compliant. It's interesting how much this thing cushions. It just absorbs the impact directly in the spot it's being hit. Pretty crazy to see one of these being used, but supposedly they work really well. Now the car is turned around, and this is the front end, and we're using the same turnbuckle system supported by the upper arm. The front suspension is mirrored. It looks like it's the same parts as the rear suspension, the way that it's set up. Now we also have a floating servo mount, pretty standard stuff. The bell crank system is really interesting. It's a one-piece bell crank, and it is also kind of floating off of the servo mount. So yeah, the servo is floating above the chassis. There is also a receiver plate, and this receiver plate is also floating off the chassis. The fan is attached to a fan mount on the center brace here, and that mount keeps the fan floating off the chassis, and it'll fit 30 or 40mm fans. And then lastly, in the front end, we have a locked spool and a gear differential in the rear end. So a lot of interesting parts on here. Some things that are new to me. A lot of it also just looks fairly standard for modern touring cars. It is a very beautiful car though when it's all finished. Now as far as the problems, I'm told that during assembly, there's a bearing that goes in this center mount that was a nightmare to get in, and it's so tight in there that it is not coming out. And then the shock shafts use a screw to secure on the piston. Well, a few of those shock shafts, the inside had no threads for the screw. They were just smooth, so new shafts had to be purchased. And then another thing, some of the bottom screws on the chassis, they're supposed to be flatheads, but the kit included button heads. Now, comparing the TC8 to the MS 1.0 from Yokomo, there are some big differences that popped out to me. Whether or not they're good or bad differences, that I can't say, but a few things that were really interesting is just the suspension design, where the TC8 is using the pillow ball and then the turnbuckle, which makes it really easy to adjust your camber, where on the Yokomo, it has this little ball cup that threads into the upper arm. It's not quite as easy. It's not nearly as easy at all to adjust your camber. And then at the bottom, the arm is actually using a ball that's popped into a carbon fiber arm down there, and we've had a few of those actually pop out on us. The Yokomo also uses a carbon fiber front shock tower, where on the TC8, it just uses these aluminum posts down here that attach to the bulkhead. And then you can use these little blue spacers to space out your angle. The sway bars on the TC8 look like they're really easy to get to, and the front sway bar is in the front. It's bearing supported, and on the Yokomo, the front sway bar is kind of a pain to get to. It's down here underneath the steering linkage. They use those little orange O-rings to kind of keep it centered. Changing that sway bar is a little bit of a pain in the butt. The TC8 shocks are also a little bit shorter than the Yokomo's. It's not by a whole lot, and the TC8 shocks are a little hard to see here, but they are a little lower. Of course, the TC8 has the steel chassis, where we're using the aluminum chassis on the Yokomo. There's no steel option for the Yokomo, and then the TC8 also comes with the double jointed drive shafts in the front and rear. The Yokomo comes with them in the front only, and then also on the outdrives on the TC8, they don't use those plastic pin retainers, which on the Yokomo, you have the option to use them, and they just have issues. We had them popping off in little crashes all the time and actually damaged some outdrives as a result. So I don't have enough experience to say whether or not that design actually helps out performance and makes you faster. I don't know, but they were kind of a nuisance. Now, on the scale, got a 51% front weight bias, 50-50 left and right, and an overall weight of 1312. This is my first time on this layout. First time with the TC8. Team Associated TC8, wow. So I think the car's got a 21.5, right? If I remember right. Looks like it's pulling a little bit to the left. Maybe it's just me. Nah, I think it is. Let me trim my, throttle trim. Oh wow, it's already trimmed so far. Oh, it feels good. Let's see. I do not know this layout, so, you need a minute. Oh my gosh. Feels fast. So far it feels really balanced. Like, oh my gosh, that I almost went in that wall. Feels like the rear end's locked in. Steering feels pretty decent. It's a little like wandery, kinda. Like coming down the straight, it's kind of hard to center it up, if that makes sense. This is the box stock setup on the TC8, and it is pretty easy to drive. It feels a lot more balanced in the front and rear than the Yokomo did in its stock setup, which was extremely aggressive in the front end and then loose in the rear end. The TC8 does have a good amount of steering, while the rear end also feels locked in. The car does have a lot of body roll, which is that darty or wanderiness I'm feeling. I think it could use some harder springs or sway bars. some sort of tuning would really help that out. That's my only criticism though. The car feels great, and with some tuning, it's just gonna get better. So guys, go check out the TC8 and everything else with it that we talked about with our links down below. I'm Brett from AMain Hobbies, and thanks for watching this video.